I would say if you're looking at overall in the game 1v1s and 2v2s, then I would think right now axe and hammer, and this isn't in order. They're definitely up there just because both of them, especially here's the thing about axe, double axe. I think if the players are both competent, and you don't even need to be, but if they are, the combos are easy. You cover a lot of space. You do reasonable damage, but the reads like you can get off nair are really really good. You know, you hit sidelight nair, ground pound. I mean, it covers so many different things depending on how you hit it. Ground pound in general is just really really good right now. D-Light, I think, is underrated a bit. It's also really good. It just has a lot of... I mean, it has all those, you know, like 180 hitboxes, right? Not to mention recovery and ground pound. They're like 360 areas. So that's why I would say axe is an A. It's better in 2s than 1s, but in 1s, I think a patient axe... you have to be more patient with it. Just because, you know, the faster a weapon is, it's going to be easier for them to just beat it since it is still slower. And then hammer, I would put... I'm not 100% sure about this, but I would say hammer would have to be up here just simply because the damage it does, and pretty much all the same things I said about axe, how 2 hammers just cover so much areas. I'd also put... I think I would put cannon as well up top. Now, I would put cannon ahead of these simply for the fact that cannon can kill you. If you get hit by certain dodges, like your certain hits on like cannon sidelight and whatnot, you're going to end up dying for it for sure. So I would say cannon is definitely up there. In 2s, I will say it's still good, but it's definitely a more, you know, in 1v1s it's easier because you're only focusing on the other opponent, so it gives you a lot more room to work with and whatnot. So I think I might end up moving axe and hammer down, but orb though, I feel like orb right now is pretty uncontested. It's such a good weapon by design. Like, Sarah alone is incredible right now. The damage it does is super high, but it also has this string potential that a lot of other weapons, they either have but don't have the damage, or they have the damage but they don't have that string potential, right? So that's another thing. These weapons, like, overall, just how early the kills you can get are crazy good. Now, I'm someone who likes to take an ease of use into the equation. So Scythe, for example, it's not an easy weapon, but at high levels, like, it's insane. Like, if you can play Scythe to its peak, it's gonna be crazy for you. Like, you're gonna be getting a lot of damage off. I should say reasonable, but it is still a lot. And not to mention the fact that there's a lot of different like options you have for like gimping people, so that's really really good too. I mean, that's part of the reason why like cannon's up there. I think like these two weapons, cannon and scythe, they both can kill early. I would say though, cannon overall is easier. And the reward can be greater sometimes. Not to mention your movement. You're moving around way more. So you're going to be put in less risky spots sometimes if you miss certain things than if you were to do like for example, cannon sidelight versus, or cannon endlight versus scythe endlight, you know? So that is something to consider. So I would say also up here would you gotta have blasters. I mean, blasters are for the mere fact alone of D-Light Recovery. They are, I mean, they're so good. As far as like how they perform into like axe and hammer, I think hammer and guns, it's kind of 50-50. It depends how you play. Because if you're playing vertical versus hammer, you're going to have a lot harder time with blasters because dare on hammer is going to beat you if you're going under them. And if you're above them, your dare won't beat them, right? But if you're playing more horizontal, I think blasters are going to have a better chance at winning with, you know, with sidelight and Sair, like just using those as pokes and just kind of playing more of like a zoning play style. But really what like puts blasters in A+, I'd say, instead of probably like towards like the bottom of A+ or like the top of A, is D-Light Recovery alone. I mean, it's actually insane. Now this is where it gets hard for me. So I would say the last weapon that's in A+ would have to be Katars. And these are roughly ordered. I mean, these two are ordered how I think. Katars, I'm going to put ahead of blasters, axe, and hammer. Just because against axe, they do have a pretty good matchup. I don't think it's axe's worst matchup, but it's a faster weapon than axe, so inherently I feel like it has an advantage, especially if you're managing to, you know, read your opponent and you're staying inside of them. Same thing with blasters. Blasters has a lot of dead zones, so if you're playing smart and you're staying inside of your opponent, blasters is going to have a really hard time covering that. I think with hammer, it's a little more... I feel like hammer's odd because hammer, I think, can do a really solid job into Katars and gauntlets, which I'll get to later. But it's still the same thing where even if hammer is at the back end of A+, they're still all very like closely they're still all close, you know, in power, right? Like just because hammer ends up beating Katars doesn't mean that it's like hammer should be up so much, because it is only like a minute difference, and a lot of it's still going to come down to player skill, right? That's why with Scythe it's kind of a conditional, because so much potential in this weapon, but just about the only person that's managed to make it, like the only person we've seen play it at that high of a level is Sandstorm, so we know what Scythe looks like at the highest level. And it's like, it's a monster of a weapon, right? And then in A, I mean, here is where, like, honestly, I think most of the weapons, the rest of the weapons go. I'll just drop in sword, weapon that it's always been well-rounded. And when it exceeds at one thing in particular or multiple things, that's when it's like, you know, it's broken, because it should be that weapon, I feel like, in this game, where it can kind of do everything. It can do decent damage, you know. It kills at an okay health. It has decent gimp potential, but it's not crazy, you know. You're not dealing 20 damage in Enlight, or like your combos aren't doing 30 plus damage or something, and you don't kill extremely early. So overall, aside from like recovery dropping, which is a big thing that really should be fixed, swords in A, and even when they would fix recovery, it's still gonna stay at like top of A, I'd say. And as far as how it like sizes up to these other weapons, it is an A, but that's not to say that it's like it, you know, with all these weapons up here, swords just like, it comes down to how good you are with it, right? Because it is a pretty easy weapon, and I don't think sword really has any horrible matchups. It just comes down to more like how you play it. Next would be lance, and I'm kind of excluding the idea of, for some people it might not be right, but I'm kind of excluding the idea of 9 dex for axe, because he is kind of like an outlier. Like, you do have Enlight, D-Light, Enlight, or you just have D-Light and Enlight, which is super good, but you know, he's the only character that can has it, so I feel like it's not really a fair way to look at it. Lance right now, I mean, it has sidelight recovery, D-Light, they made D-Light better. Nair is still Nair. It's a weapon that in 2v2, I feel like it can be a little hard to use, but the thing is, if you are in a 2v1 situation, Lance is so good on both sides. You know, you being the one person and you being alongside your teammate. Lance is just so good. Not to mention, like I said, it is pretty easy, and like racking up damage isn't particularly hard. I will say though, it's hard to judge it because really the only person playing it is Costelix. So that also is something to keep in mind, that he's really the only one we can go off of. Next, Bo. Bo's kind of in a weird spot. A lot of people's complaints are like, it's about D-Light. D-Light is really slow. Not to mention, like, Sidelight into D-Light, it's one frame at its best, but even then, it's weird because sometimes you can jump it. But yeah, it has a good combo game. Nair's really strong. Dare's strong. Sarah's strong. Like, pretty much every other part of it is really strong. So yeah, it doesn't kill super early unless, like, you hit a Dare off stage. And in 2s, it's a weapon that's, like, it's solid. The only real person we see using it is Remy, and I mean, he has so much experience on it. Noel too, I will say. So yeah, both those guys, like, can make it work. They play it differently too, but it's definitely a weapon that if you played it, you'd find success with it. But at the same time, there are, like, clear better options for sure. Spear's a weird weapon right now because, like, Sarah's good, Dare's good, Nair's also strong. Like, the whole aerial kit's super good. Like, Sidelight's a pretty weak approach. I don't say weak. Like, if you do get a dodge, you're gonna get good damage off of it, double dealing to Sarah at least. In 2v2s though, Spear's like a staple weapon. So like, if we were talking 2s, I would probably put in A+, just because it's a basic, simple weapon. And the problem is, like sword, like axe, like hammer, basic, simple weapons, if you buff them too much, they're just gonna be stupid to, like, play against, pretty much. Because you're gonna have, like, a Sarah that's way too strong, or, like, Nair's gonna be way too fast or something, right? Like, you look at Scythe, when Scythe was at its best, Scythe was still, at least from it was still fun to play. And to be quite honest, when people were, like, for spectators, it was still insane to watch. It was still really fun to watch, even if it was broken. Like, people were like, okay, yeah, the weapon's broken. But a broken Scythe is way more fun to watch than a broken sword, spear, axe, hammer, even blasters, right? So that's really all my thoughts on Spear. Even just because, and again, keep in mind, just because I have it this low, it's not saying much, because I mean, these three categories, they're so close together. So I feel like it's not really doing it justice, because when you look at it like this, it looks like I'm saying, you know, Spear is just so much worse than Katars or whatever, or just anything above it. But I guess just, you know, that's the downfall of tier lists, especially if someone doesn't watch the full video, then they won't really understand. A good example though of Spear is how, like, Ethan did a really good job into playing Wrenched on Katars, right? Like, Wrenched, one of the best Katar players in the world. Ethan, arguably best Spear player right now. And he beat him with Spear. And the thing is, I think Spear does such a good job at stuffing out, like, Katars, specifically. Like, I think Spear into Katars is a really good matchup. Okay. So this brings into the last one, which I'm not even sure if I really like having it this low. Gauntlets are weird too, because, like, it's a weapon I've played for a long time, so I've seen them when they've been like insanely broken, and I've still played them, not as much anymore. But the thing is, like, I think people are still, like, they saw the nerfs that happened, and yes, the nerfs were big, but there's still good things about gauntlets, so I'll start with that. Like, the good things are ground pound, I mean, is still great since you can steer it. Nair, even though they nerfed it, off stage especially, it's really, really good. Sarah's always been good. They didn't nerf that, and you know, when they gutted gauntlets, at least I don't think they did. Sarah's still fantastic. Endlight's fast. I mean, that's to be expected though. Recovery's pretty easy to hit, although now it doesn't kill, which is, you know, on the other, that's the other side of the coin, is that it's a really fast move, but now it doesn't kill at all. Like, it kills super late. So yeah, like, gauntlets do still have a couple good things that you can kind of, I don't want to say abuse, but if you use it right, like, gauntlets are still going to do a really, really good job. However, there's a lot more, compared to the other weapons in my eyes, gauntlets just have a lot more bad about them right now compared to other weapons. So I would say first being that after, like don't get me wrong, again, you can win with any of these weapons. Like, matchups aren't as important as, like, the players, right? Like, at the end of the day, even though I think, like, Hammer does such a good job into gauntlets, or, like, Bo does pretty good into gauntlets too, if you are just the better player, you're gonna win with gauntlets still. So I feel like, you know, like, just because I have gauntlets this low doesn't mean they still can't be, or they don't have winning matchups throughout this. Like, I would say gauntlets do a very solid job. Probably, at least to me, I mean, I've played it a lot into Axe, and I think gauntlets do the best job into Axe out of any weapon. Next being Katars, but yeah, like, I think gauntlets do so good into Axe. Like, sword, I would say it's like 50-50. It just, that's a matchup to me that really, really comes down to how good you are. And then after that, it's kind of iffy. Like, then you get into the territory. Like I said, Hammer, I think, obliterates gauntlets if played right. Katars can, I feel like, have a slight advantage, but again, it just depends how you play them. Cannon, I think, does a fantastic job. Orb just does everything on gauntlets, but better. I mean, both these weapons do. That's why they're up here. But other things that gauntlets kind of suck at right now, to be quite frankly, killing, like I said earlier, with recovery, it's very bad. The combo game is pretty weak right now, which makes sense. But more of the reads you can get off of them now with, like, you catch them with a Scythe, right? They have no dodge. You hit an air, you throw them down, you go for gravity cancel delight, but they end up falling out because Nair has so much less stun time. So yeah, those are just a few of the things as to why gauntlets are pretty weak. Their on stage is relatively mediocre. Their off stage is still strong. But yeah, some changes though I would make to gauntlets, and what I've talked to, like, Sandstorm with and Santi, is, you know, both of them, you know Sandstorm plays gauntlets, Santi too, he plays a lot of Val. Santi, I think, initially recommended, and Sandstorm, I talked about it a bit, something they could do for gauntlets is give slightly more stun to delight to make it so follow-ups are more consistent. So it still won't kill, but, like, if you hit a delight at max range, you're going to be able to follow up with recovery for sure, you know? Because right now, you can get a for sure kill confirm, you get the delight, but because you hit it max range, you're not going to be able to get the follow-up you want off the recovery. So yeah, that's what we talked about. Another thing that Sandstorm brought up was giving Gauntlet ground pound, reverting its change and making it fast again, which was 13 frames of startup, I think he said. Right now it's like at 17. So then that adds more variety into reads, where you could do, you could hit your Nair into ground pound on stage. It just adds more variety. I think it's overall healthy because then it sets you up for more. So that was a good idea for him. But yeah, just keep in mind that all these weapons I think the fact that I don't have anything, you know, in a D, C, or B tier should tell you that everything's super close right now. Like, it's split between S, A plus, and A. Like, A plus and A arguably being, it might as well be, you know, just like after hammer, you know, you just put sword, right? So yeah, they're all super close right now. I will say though, I think everyone can agree that these two weapons, especially Orb, almost universally, people are going to agree that Orb at least is a monster of a weapon. So we'll see what happens though. But yeah, that's the tier list, guys.